Good morning.
All right, so I'm Scott Noodleman. I'm the COO of the Intermed Group out of Gainesville, Florida. Sean Chatfield, he's our VP of Support Services. We were supposed to be presenting today with Riley Tasker. She is a sales support specialist for us at Intermed. The key feature that we really wanted her here for was she owned 5 radiology clinics up in the Atlanta market, but she has gotten COVID and unable to travel. So I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate she's stuck with us, but we'll take you through this. We'd like to make it as interactive as possible. Ask questions, give examples. What this really comes down to is best practice sharing. Probably nothing in here that we're going to talk about is recreating the wheel. It's just putting it back in front of you. It's something to think about, putting it all together, and how could you implement or possibly make changes to your department or clinic or whatever it is that you're responsible for in the imaging world here. So if I can figure this thing out, there you go.
So some of the objectives today that we'll be going over are, we'll be discussing partnerships with your service providers. Too low. Can everybody hear me? That's the first thing, all the way in the back. So we're good. Service contracts, best practices there, and then ways to streamline workflow and improve the efficiencies of your clinics. So some of the topics we'll reach.
So when it comes to partnerships, we're really talking about partnerships between the end users and your service provider. So building relationships, having a trusted partner in the service world is very important. There's one thing to have service providers that come in and they do fix your equipment and do PMs, but really they're a key to a lot of productivity in your facility that you may not be utilizing today. Make sure that you know who your partner is, what their vision is, where they're going, and how that fits into where you want to go with your department or clinic. If you're planning on growing and adding facilities, adding departments, adding buildings, adding new equipment, choosing the right provider could really drive productivity for you as you move forward. Partnering with someone that's willing to come in and do quarterly reviews with you, understanding that, look, we all have service contracts. We'll all have some level of service contracts, whether it's a warranty or an after warranty, regular service contract. There are SLAs in those, and we'll talk about those a little bit more in the service contract area, but understanding what you're paying for and what you're getting and making sure that they go together and fit the vision of where you're trying to go as a provider. Having a collaborative partner, again, doing more than just service and PMs, think about the capital planning and the life cycle of all of your capital equipment. Think about when you're making that pre-purchase decision, if you're working with just an OEM or a single modality provider, you could get a lot of information and take all that in. But if you also looked at, getting some feedback, sorry. If you also took a look at, potentially looking at a bigger contract where that provider has a lot of information about all different OEMs, the information that you could get during the capital planning process, what are the differences in the features and benefits from that, let's say a Philips versus a Siemens MRI. Well, they both may do the job, but maybe the footprint's different. Maybe you get more features for what you need. So over here, Philips may be better for you, but Siemens may be better for somebody else. If you're not really working with somebody who's got the experience of working on multiple devices, you're probably not really working with a partner that can help you go through.
Right, and to speak on collaboration, we've got a variety of people in this room that are from different walks of the industry, whether it's a provider or whether it's a consumer of the services. You know, when you build that trusted partnership, you know, we want to encourage both sides. You know, so much is expected of a service company to provide information to a customer, but we encourage the customers to embrace that partnership and be more of a collaborative effort of sharing your needs as you go through, and trusting your provider to work with you through those cases and try to determine what's the best solution for you. You know, not always are your providers there to make every sale, to get every service contract. You know, your providers are there at many times to help you make the best decision for what you need to do for your facility. You know, and in the long run, you know, ultimately it helps both of you, because if you're successful, your provider's successful, and there's a long-term, you know, relationship there.
So briefly touched about multimodality and multi-vendor. In some cases, it's good to have single focus. You know, you're basically focused on, your department's basically focused on just ultrasound, and you're a Canon customer. So in that case, probably good to have somebody who's really focused on what you have. But if you have mixed modalities and mixed vendors, working with partners that know what's going on could really help. Like I said before, you know, capital planning, you know, most of us aren't in the business of always trying to sell equipment, but we can help you pick the right equipment. Where, you know, a lot of ISOs, even some of the OEMs now, they are multi-vendor. They have a lot of information that they could share with you and help you pick the right equipment. So, you know, knowing your supplier, knowing what they could service, knowing that they have the expertise to do the work, and finding somebody, because sometimes you may pick a one-stop shop, pick one vendor to come in and service all your equipment, or at least manage it. You know, the biggest thing, you know, well, I've been saying for years, but, you know, the biggest thing that we get confused upon is just because I have it under a contract, right? My job is not necessarily to fix that equipment and do the PMs. My job is to get that equipment fixed and make sure that your PMs are done on time. We may have very good service partners that we share that responsibility with, that, but you have, as the consumer, you have one person to go to that's managing all your contracts, that's looking to see how they're all managed for you, that's taking care of managing the SLAs, managing your PM schedules, you know, looking at the uptime of your equipment. Also, by combining them all, you may get a volume discount by putting it all under one contract, and then it becomes a one-on-one versus one-on-many relationship. Same thing goes with the OEMs. You know, if you have multiple OEMs and have multiple contracts, you may be spending top dollar on each one of those because you don't have the volume. Maybe you only have one of each piece of equipment, so you're not getting a multi-device savings like you might with a multi-vendor company. And this isn't to say that going with a company is the only way to get this done. If you have a really strong, you know, in-house shop that's maintaining your HTM department is managing all of your contracts, all of this can be done in-house as well. This isn't about always outsourcing, but it's knowing who you have, who's managing it, and bringing that all together under one management to drive savings. Anything?
No, I'm good.
I mean, we'll pause here for a second and just, you know, anybody have any experience with either side of this they want to share with the group? Because I want to make this collaborative. I don't want to just stand up here and pitch, because we'll be done in about 15 minutes. Unless you want us to be done in 15 minutes. Nathan?
And work with third parties, negotiated contract, streamline a little bit better for them, you know, certain months.
And you handle that directly yourself, individually. So the same principle, just working, whether it's an in-house or whether it's a, hiring a company to do that for you. It's exactly what, we're preaching here.
Maybe you have multiple locations, just one location, or two locations. Got a third location. Okay, one do the same thing, we probably like older, but sure. Right.
Exactly. Anyone else?
So I'm recently new to my current organization here at Northern Arizona Healthcare. And one of the things that I'm really trying to develop these relationships, I have many vendors across different sites. And one thing I'm working on them with is how do I build my productivity, looking at equipment utilization, downtime, and getting those statistics, because those actually help me quite a bit with getting positions. If I see my CT is only utilized 53% of the time, how can I drive volume? And those are the types of things I did not have previously with very guarded information because I was using a third-party vendor as well. So I only got the service side, and now, for multiple reasons, the organization is looking at vendor competencies and things like that. But now with this collaboration, I can use that information to drive my productivity, to drive my FTE, and then my overall strategy. I'm seeing quite a bit of improvement with this current.
So let me ask you a question. How are you measuring your utilization? What, are you just measuring it manually? Do you have any tools?
No, so they actually provide that to me. So I have seen engineers and providers. They give me these quarterly, but also they send me a report. And then I can go into the system I center, for example, and be able to pull some of these reports that I can the amount of information, I can look at hour by hour, I can look at overall, I can look at the providers who are the most help. Even from I'm looking at my whole operation for efficiency, and I know the exact time that the patient is spending on the scanner, because now I'm using that to support tech aides, so my tech can work at the highest part of their job. So it's really providing a lot of value.
Something to, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so the OEMs are providing it, so it's part of the package, and there's actually a free version, and then there's a paid version. The free version has a lot of information that's sufficient, because it's just a lot of data coming at me. I gotta do something. But it's the exact stuff I want. I want to know when my machine is not working like weekends, and I'm trying to open up weekend hours. Or if I want to improve my provider relationship, I can see the top 5 providers. I can look at that trend, see when it's going down, and be able to go specifically to that office. Because that was something that, how do I know if I'm providing good service so I can actually tailor it? So, yeah, it's incredible. And I probably have a report that I can
So feeding off of that, and something we actually didn't put in the presentation here, what has people thought about, or how have you thought about, especially when you have multiple sites, cybersecurity on your medical devices? And a lot of the cybersecurity softwares today, whether it's Medigate, Solera, Palo Alto, all can give you that information now as well, and in one report versus many. But they're also looking for vulnerabilities, patching, and all the other stuff. Has anybody looked at cybersecurity and what that means to your organizations and the productivity of your organization?
You might be able to say something. So I worked with seniors before, facilities, commercial organizations, and we developed things like relocation management for but in Canada, I learned that company is really protected every system. None of the Canada systems ever been included with any technology because they protect everything behind the firewall. They have a Barracuda device, and everything is behind the firewall, so nothing can whenever you see like script reading, they have a central track, none of it counts. So cybersecurity is very, very important. I have not seen that in something.
It's a growing problem in the medical world. More and more devices are becoming network enabled or storing PHI, but a lot of the software that's out there today, besides doing your cybersecurity and alerts and all that, your utilization reports, I could tell you down from 5 different manufacturers, but we could tell you from, each study, if you're doing a shoulder, how many images you took, how many were used in red versus hit the cutting room floor, right? So when we talk about workflow, that's important information if you're going to change your protocols to enable better workflow. Scott, you had a question? Oh, I thought you raised your hand. Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a question if you like.
Sure.
What do you do to deploy locally for cybersecurity? The tools that you use or any processes that you have or employ?
Well, if you thought about a Venn diagram, 3 circles intersecting, you have your scanning and monitoring softwares, the Medigates, the Solara, Zingbox, CloudPost, Rapid7, go on forever of everybody that's trying to get that space. You've got your physical inventory of your cyber information that you need to have, and how does the software talk and interact with your CMMS, right? You're still gonna have to do some manual stuff. So let's take an Alaris infusion pump, for example, or a GECT. It's going to transmit maybe a make, model, serial number that doesn't match exactly what you have in your CMMS. So someone's got to collect that data, put it all together, usually match it by MAC address, and bring those together. So then there's that hands-on piece. And then the third piece is really your governance and mitigation. You really can't remediate all cyber. So the best you could do is know what your risks are and plan for what do you do when. So when an alarm comes in, you have to have that manual that says, all right, this is a capsule HL7 conversion device, and it's in the OR. So IT is not going to respond to that. I've got to go up, a biomed's got to go up and see what's going on with that device and what's communicating. So the deployment methods are different, but there's that intersection. You need all 3 pieces for it to actually be useful. If I just do monitoring, there was I believe it was a LifeLock commercial, if you all remember it. There's the dentist and the assistant looking at this guy with this thing in his mouth, and they're, yep, that's a really big cavity. Okay, you gotta have to have that taken care of, right? That's kind of what the monitoring software does today. They're just telling you you have a problem and giving you an alert. You still need a plan and governance on what to do. You may be able to prevent attacks by changing policy on devices. It may be manual. You may have to put a device in between, whatever it is. Every situation is different, so it's putting it together and understanding it. But I mean, that's a completely different topic, but it just worked into what she was saying back there. But it's just really nice with some of what the tools are doing and the AI in those softwares now, that it could figure out this is an infusion pump and this one's acting normal, this one's not. It's a CT or an MR, and you've done this many cases today. This technologist ran these, this doctor, the provider, ordered it. So you could take all that information and put that together into useful reports to create productivity in your facility.
Yeah, with the variety of different ages.
Just speak up so everybody can hear you back.
There are a lot of devices that are any age, different ages, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of this stuff's gonna be 10 or 12 years old, and a lot of those software systems are, the embedded OSs, the Windows 7 and Windows XP aren't gonna be supported by those OEMs. But what tools are available to help mitigate those different real hard?
Well, again, it turns back to that mitigation. I can't fix somebody who's got Windows XP and the OEM hasn't done anything to enable you to upgrade it. It's a 15-year-old device. They don't want to invest the money to figure that out. So how do I mitigate that risk? Do I put a firewall between it? Do I change policy, so only certain ports are open. There's a lot of different things that you have to do, and it's all device specific, but you have to go in and do it. But the biggest problem is, OEMs are not all at the same level with patch management. They might have released a patch that maybe GE and Siemens hadn't approved, so you can't put that patch on, but that patch is creating a vulnerability for you. So how do you do that? That's where that whole governance and mitigation piece comes in. And back on topic. Sorry about that.
I mean, that ultimately plays into this conversation, whether you have the luxury of having someone who can spend the time and looking at every vendor and every piece of equipment you have and looking at what Siemens can provide or GE can provide. There's still a lot of other equipment within your facility that doesn't have the technology, the ability to transmit that information. We all have facilities that are running 20-year-old nuclear cameras and, devices that have been upgraded, retrofitted, and all these things. But on the other side of that, working with a collaborative team that can look at cybersecurity and look at your solutions for you, because maybe those OEMs haven't upgraded, or they're no longer in existence, or different things. So that team can at least invest and look and research that information for you and use them as a tool.
I mean, for an example, I know a provider out there that's got a Windows 10 upgrade to some older nuclear cameras that are running XP today. It's not that expensive. The nuclear camera is completely a great, still sell brand new, but to get the upgrade, so you could have almost a brand new machine, changing the computer and the operating system, prolong that life. But again, working with the right partners who are going to bring that information to you versus, hey, we got to get a new nuclear camera because this was running Windows XP. We could, the right people could say, hey, did you ever think of doing this, or whatever this is, for all different examples.
Exactly.
So I didn't get your name. Nicole. As Nicole said earlier, she took all of her service contracts, and I think Nathan said the same thing, reviewed where they are. This is probably one of the most productive exercises you could do that I would think does not happen nearly enough. When you look at your service contracts, and if you look at the diagram on the right over here, it's collecting all that information. Sometimes it's held in the department, sometimes it's held in purchasing, but understanding what your true spend is on all your contracts, getting that information, knowing what's covered, what's not covered. When they say includes glass, well, what's glass mean? My monitor is glass. Is that included or not included? Sometimes you have to read the fine print, but getting all your contracts together, whether you're a hospital, whether you're a freestanding clinic or surgery center, it's real important to go through all of them, understand the start date, the end date, what's covered, what's not, and how do you manage the SLAs when you got 15 different contracts from 15 different suppliers, or if you're dealing with one provider, but everything's on 5 different contracts instead of rolled into one service agreement. How are you making sure that the SLAs in your contract are actually being met? I was at the bar last night downstairs, and someone said to me, I'm so sick of vendors saying anything to win a service contract, and then they don't do what they say. Well, how do you know? What could we be doing different as a provider and as a consumer to make sure that that's happening? One thing is your quarterly partnership reviews. Second thing is getting your reports. But most important, if you don't know what's in your contract, you don't know what you're supposed to be getting. And so long as your equipment's up and the technologists and the doctors aren't screaming, most people just are happy. If you want to talk about creating efficiencies, this is a great place to drive the efficiencies.
Well, another thing to look at on that is, under your contracts, do you have what you need, or are you paying for what you don't need? There's so many times that when you're sitting face to face with sales teams from multiple different vendors, and they're competing for your business. They're throwing out the 99.99% uptime, or the 95% uptime, or the 24/7 coverage, or and all these things that, do you really need them? Your facility is an 8 to 5 facility. Why do you need 24/7 coverage? Are you paying for things you don't need, or are you paying outside of the contract for things you really need to renegotiate to get back into your contract? who's reviewing these for you, and is it something that you're fortunate enough to have someone on staff that can focus their life reviewing dozens of contracts and having to deal with that, or work with a collaborative team that can do that for you. There's optimization on both sides of that, but just keep that in mind. When you want to bring efficiencies to your facility, you need to look at, you don't need 286 channels of cable, when you watch 12. So, looking for what you need just because it's flashy and it's fancy doesn't mean that you necessarily need that.
So again, just to add on that, so you need full service, you need PM only, but a big place that, we've really been investigating at Intermed where we work, and I got two of my salespeople sitting in the front row here heckling us a little, but what we're really looking at is right sizing what's needed. If you've got 10 ultrasounds and they all have just standard probes on them, the chances are on average, you're gonna replace one or have issues with one of 4 probes a year out of your whole pool. Why cover all the probes at 100% coverage? Sometimes that makes sense, high volume, but sometimes you have one technologist running the machines or 2 that are really careful, and maybe you could take a little bit more risk to reduce your cost. You may have one bad year, but in the long run, you may end out better. So understanding what your risk limits are and really diving into, say, what do I need? What is my goals as an organization, and how is a full service contract with glass versus a full service contract without glass or PM only, how's that going to get me to my future goals, right? It's about sitting down, understanding it, negotiating with your providers, what works best for you, and then making that decision go forward. There's a great opportunity to create efficiencies there alone.
Absolutely. Another area to approach is equipment evaluation. We all have that equipment that's been in our facility for 20 years and that functions fantastically, but is it really functioning to its optimal level for your facility? We've all just been happy to live with that 20-year-old system because we're getting patients done. Well, can you be getting more patients done? Can you get better technology for your radiologist, for your doctors? Doing a full assessment of all of your devices, is important. Looking at the age, looking at the technology. Is it current technology? The utilization, something that was talked about there, your utilization on that, is the technology holding back your utilization or vice versa, and service,
Well, Just think about for a second when you talk about utilization and technology, doing a true assessment of where you're at. If you have a 4-slice CT, the odds are, if you're running it at full capacity, switching to a 16, just going up to a 16 slice could probably get you 4 or 5 additional patients per day through that one system. Is it time to upgrade, or you're good where you're at? Just knowing what that is, and then the service, the S in the assessment there is, how often do I need service on this thing? Older equipment needs more PMs, may break more often. If you have an older, I'll just use an example, GECT, and you have a DARC, which is the disk array, that's got outdated technology in it. Those hard drives are not really manufactured anymore. So you got to buy them. You got to figure out how to fix them. Everyone's servicing these used DARCs, and we're just replacing them. And someone comes, the cleaning crew at night when your CT's on, comes and hits the console, and bam, 3 hard drives are out like that. You're down in the morning. You don't know why, and we're replacing the system again. So, sometimes upgrading could help you with your throughput. Sometimes you don't need to upgrade, but understanding where you're at, where all your equipment is, and putting together a 3 or 5 or 7 year plan for where you want to be and where your organization is going. You may come up with 5 things that says, you can't really see down at the bottom here, but the scores of 7 to 10, when we do an assessment, says you probably want to start looking for a replacement now. Doesn't mean you have to replace it today. It's probably on your highest list of when you're going to upgrade. You want to start looking at these devices sooner than some of the other devices. But older technology could work for many people. I mean, we have 25-year-old nuclear cameras, like Sean was saying. It gets 12 patients a week through it. The studies come out beautiful. The thing never goes down. Even though the score would say you probably want to replace it, why would you, right? But it also lets you know where you're at. So sitting down, doing a true evaluation or bringing someone in to help you with that could be a really big game changer for your organization. Maybe not today. It just sets the roadmap for where you want to be.
Right, and using that collaborative effort, working with your service providers, providers, whomever you're working with, you know, we see what's out there going on because we don't work just with you. We work with dozens and dozens of other customers, vendors, where it shows like this that not everyone attends consistently. We see where the market is. We understand that on that 20-year-old piece of equipment that all you have to do is do a quick upgrade and you're back to normal, versus outlaying capital on something that once you outlay and buy a brand new machine, it gets you no better than if you did the upgrade, but maybe you're not aware of that because you're not in the world consistently of looking at those things. Using the opportunities of your collaborative team to just help you do that assessment, to look and know what is out there for you to make the best decisions. That's ultimately the goal, is efficiency. You know, we're all facing capital challenges. We're all facing, everybody wants more for less. So how do we obtain that and be able to provide the best service to our patients is really what we're all here for.
Some sort of visual about the contract, what covers, start and any recommendations to get organized like that, because that keeps like a job by itself.
It is.
And I feel like I'm going to expect it all on contract, what covers, what I just can't leave myself out there.
There are a few consultants out there that's all they do. They have no other skin in the game other than to come out and help you collect that information and put it together. There are companies like ours that will help you do that. There are, you know, other providers in the room here that do that as part of their service contract. So, you know, one of the things that we've done in the past is we come in and we could do that assessment, and if you were to sign a contract with us, then you kind of build that in. If you don't, then you just pay for the consulting fee, right? But there's all different ways and people that can help get that done. The hardest thing is getting started, right? It's this overwhelming pile of contracts. You say you want to start with a manufacturer, so you pick your Siemens equipment, you start going through it, and you go, wow, there's a lot of information here. So you say, all right, that's too much. Let me go with somebody smaller. It's a matter of just taking the time, knowing where all the files are. Again, if you're working in a hospital, it's different than working, you know, like you do with a bunch of different clinics. You know, where's all that information held? We have problems collecting all that information within a facility because sometimes, I mean, I'll go outside of imaging for a second. Sometimes the contracts are held in the lab and the OR and the nursing department and the radiology department all separate. So you got to find out what filing cabinets have this all, and you're going to find out they're not all there. You know, understanding that you don't know what you don't know is a big problem. Collecting all that and putting it into a nice metrics that says, here's your contract, here's your start and end date, here's what it includes, and building out a template to just simply go through it and have a summary of each one helps. The hardest part, starting.
And you use the old, you know, term story, everybody uses, you know, how do you eat an elephant, you know, just one bite at a time. Well, the consultants, companies like ourselves and others, you know, we just are there to help cook that elephant up and make it really tasty and just really get it to where you can make those bites a lot easier. So, and it's what we do every day, all day long. So, because we're always having to look for the right solutions, because, you know, ultimately we are, as a collaborative team, up against, you know, our other competitors, which are, you know, wonderful people, and we're faced with the OEMs and different things. So, you know, these teams have to be able to provide a layer of additional services to be able to be the best at what we can do. So
I'll tell you, it's an, go ahead.
Something where I came from prior to stepping into this team here, I managed about 125 contractors. What I ended up doing is a suggestion you could do, you don't have to, is like actually build a Excel spreadsheet, each single contract based on date, term, is it 3-year, 5-year, and then I went through and I vetted each one of them to see if I could bundle and turn them into masters. Give you an example, take my whole logic stuff, bundle it all together in one master contract. So I had 8 different logic contracts coming out at different times. And then I could just sort and filter depending on what I had coming out. If I knew, and it helped with the budget. At the end of the year, I already had my budget numbers, what I knew my contract expenses were going to be. And then you can evaluate internal, external, what you want to do with it when you come up with the bill. So there's different things you could do, and I could just filter it based on month of renewal. So I already had, and then I just color coded. If I knew this year I had these renewing, then I already have what dates they're going to come out by month and start working on 90 days ahead.
Right.
Just little things like that.
Right.
The biggest problem, like you're saying, is that step up, put it together. If it did probably 3 weeks, working till 10 o'clock at night to put this thing together. But it paid dividends in the long run over 4 years.
Right. And then also it's learning what you don't know,
Yeah.
you know, and then piecing all that together, you know, and working with companies that have a database who work with this information all the time. You know, you don't think about that portable that's down in the, you know, the ambulatory care center that nobody ever touches. It sits in a closet, or the pumps that are somewhere and all these things. So, you know, someone who can go, well, what about this? What about that? You know, so, you know, using a consultant, using a team, you know, building your own team is big. Nathan, you had a question?
So we had contracted CFO, stuff out, and the radiology, just over there, director, she didn't have all of that. And then I was like, well, cool, and I just walk around, just walk around the whole, I go, who services, like, oh, I'm not sure, before I play, someone else knows that, you know, they said, oh, I don't know, so I said, okay. So what I did for anything I didn't know, I said, who do you contact? Like, who do you call? I forget when you want to call someone to come out, who comes? She had all that information.
Right.
So they were able to help me out. So I called each one of them, but I didn't have it. I said, no, that's not.
Right.
Trying to go get everyone. I said, hey, the service contract. I need you to email me the service contract as standing.
Right. Absolutely.
I took all that and I scanned my stuff in. I made a folder, scanned all the contracts, and I have a P drive that's shared. So throw myself out. I'm able to access throughout VPN to work anytime I need to, and that's how I was able to kind of help myself to literally like start and try to figure out how the best way to learn the whole.
Right. And the biggest challenge is, the first challenge is finding it. Next challenge is reading it, understanding it. I mean, we all know that every vendor, OEM, you name it, you know, they have a legal team that puts stuff together that none of us can read and make sense of. And, you know, and it's not to our advantage, obviously. It's obviously to whomever provided you that contract is to their advantage in some way, you know. And so evaluating what your needs, what the SLAs of that contract are, and are they really effective for you, you know. And so not just finding the information, digesting the information, and then converting it to what's best for your facility and how, and your needs and what your vision is, because it's not your vision today and what you're doing today that you're really worried about. It's tomorrow, 5 years from now, you know.
So two things to that. The other thing is, you know, you did speak to your CFO. A good place to look for the information is your general ledger. You'll see where you're paying for somebody. That's a start of a list to get to all your contracts. They're probably amortizing those costs out over the 12-month period. You can see those contract amortizations, get one list that's probably 80% accurate, right? There's still the 20% that you don't know what you don't know. I liked your method of, hey, who do you call for service? Hey, I don't have a contract. Give me a copy of it. Always good to help. The other thing to think about here is once you do that and have that information, think about, like Ed said, compiling them into a master agreement, right? If you have a bunch of different contracts with one vendor, what if you compile them into one that with all the same start and end dates? You may get a volume discount that you weren't getting because you were dealing with different departments at that provider. The other thing is, you know, look at what are the possibilities of renewing early. You know, would that provider be willing to give a discount for an additional 3 years now versus waiting 2 more years for it to happen? You know, again, it consolidates all your stuff, gets the more you can bring the number of contracts you have down, the easier it is to manage.
Right. And speaking on that, I mean, we all know you sign that CT, 5-year CT service agreement at, you know, whatever, $80,000 a year. And 3.5 years in, the market's down at 60,000 and here you are paying 80. Now, you signed an agreement. It's like a mortgage. You need to pay it. You agreed to it. But that's where instead of going out and trying to look for a new provider, you sit down with your provider and you say, hey, I want to do another 5 or another 3, and let's go ahead and renew now. But can we get this down to a more marketable rate? Because that person, that team should know the service history and can look at it and say, well, yeah, we really haven't been hammered on our side. And so it's a win-win for both teams to, your service team can lock down service for a longer period. They can continue to build their service team to support you properly. At the same time, you can help cut some revenue, cut some costs on your end. So. Next. Service contracts, reducing downtime. Some of these things, people take it a different way. One of the huge issues is PMs. Everybody gets PMs done. Everybody gets PMs done different ways. Everybody expects PMs done different ways, different times, different days, you name it. But the importance of PMs, while they're annoying to a facility because you have to schedule downtime and you have to worry about all these things and working around patients, it's a priority to keep your equipment running smoothly, looking for future problems. It allows your engineers, whether they're mandated, number one. I mean, that's a key issue here. We all have to look at regulatory issues there. Number two, it creates an optimal performance for your system. Maybe not so much on a portable, but these high dollar, high use, high spinning CTs and these MRs that are cranking out all the stuff that's going on. If you don't do quality PMs and really stay on top of that, you're going to deal with future downtime. So you want to stay ahead of those things. Environmental conditions, huge in today's world. We're all seeing issues with power. We're all seeing issues with water and humidity and all these things. So being cognizant of that and keeping track of that, there are solutions out there to help with your power issues. If you're working with the right team, they can put products on there that are very low cost that can eliminate a substantial amount of your power issues that a lot of people don't think about. And nobody wants the finger game. Oh, it died because, the electric company who's going to say our power's perfect. Those things happen. So, having a team that's working with you to find the solution instead of against you is a big thing. Proper use, well-trained staff, okay? Technologists never break anything. We all know that from no matter whether you're on the service side or you're on the user side. Technologists don't break equipment. So I got that out of the way. The reality is service engineers, technologists, everybody, it happens, that's life. But proper training of your team to use this equipment is ideal. We've all seen the portable run into the drywall and the stretcher run into the gantry and all those things, and it doesn't damage anything right now. Later on down the road, as this consistently happens, it can create future problems. The world of DR panels, the drop problems and all these things and proper handling, just educating the staff to use things in a better way functionally is one thing, and then the next step is educating them to use things in a better way for your patients and for your throughput is another. So, and the last one that I really like to hit on, and this is a huge one to me, I've got 31 years in the service industry, so report problems early. We all know those sites that have a problem at 9 a.m. and they write it down, but they've got a patient load they just want to crank out and they'll deal with it at 5. Okay, 5 o'clock, service call comes in, then it's an argument of who's going to pay overtime. Well, it was broken this morning, blah, blah, blah. What is that doing for your facility? Kicking the can down the road doesn't always help.
Sean.
Yeah.
True story, last Monday, just installed an MRI about 6-8 weeks ago. Monday morning, the customer noticed a significant change in image quality, but they felt they could still get through all their cases. So they didn't want us to come in that night because they had a full schedule till 9 o'clock at night. The next day they used the machine. On Wednesday, the machine is now hard down. So the amp was drifting till it got to a point where the power was too high and it just blew out the amplifier. $49,000 part and 2 days of downtime. The day it went down, and the next day, well, we had to get the part, bring the part in, recalibrate the machine and get it up and going. Whereas on Monday, if we would have gotten in there and had access to the system, we would have noticed that the amplifier power was rising, whether it was drifting or not. We could have turned it down, ordered a new one, scheduled time to bring it in. They would have had zero downtime, maybe the 2 hours they gave us the machine to check it. But because they were able to limp along and still use the device, they did until it finally broke, and then they were down for 2 days. So, you know, weird noises, things loose, table not moving up or down and gears grinding, image quality, sudden changes in image quality are all signs that there's something wrong. The sooner that's reported, the sooner somebody could go in and take a look at it, the odds are you're going to reduce your downtime. You know, even if we have to order a part, but they were still able to limp along, we would have known what it was. We would have gotten the part there. Then when they finished their last patient on Tuesday, we could have been in there replacing it, right? But instead, they kept going. They didn't want us there, and then they had experienced 2 days.
Right. And the other
of
thing you
downtime.
have to look at is the cost associated with that. Somebody's paying for a $49,000 amp. Okay. Now, whether it's your contract says you didn't give us permission to come in, you now have to pay $49,000 outside of the contract, or your service provider has to pay for that part that could have been mitigated and taken care of prior. So if your goal is to reduce your expenses, you can't expect your service providers to eat costs that are outside of what could have been resolved by fixing this ahead of time. So you know, they're going to look at your contract and go, oh, you're an abusive user. We're not going to lower your costs. We're not going to sit at the table and say, oh, I can't really negotiate with you because you keep doing this to me. You know, so have to look at it from both perspectives of how to mitigate these high costs. You know, these are high costs, and the downtime was huge for your facility, but when you take it into your reviewing your service contracts, that could be a financial hit on your facility also. It just depends on how far you've mitigated those issues. Next, any comments, any questions before we move to the next one? All right. Me? All right, yay. Redundancies. So, you know, one of the big things is eliminating redundancies, looking for redundancies within your facility. So, you know, whether it's doing it yourself, using a collaborative team, a consultant, but looking at your equipment usage, looking at your throughput. You know, you may have 6 C-arms in your OR, and they're consistently using 3, with 3 sitting in the hallway, but being picked up here and there. When if you did better scheduling, better planning, you can alleviate 2 C-arms, use that capital somewhere else, use that service contract money somewhere else, but better schedule your time and have maybe 1 sitting in there. You may have 1 X-ray room that's being used 24/7. That's fantastic. That's great efficiencies. But when that unit goes down, where are you dealing with, you know? So redundancies can be good, redundancies can be bad. You know, redundancies in staff. You know, it's not always good to have 3 CT techs sitting around, but it's not good to have 1, you know. Looking at your staff and realizing that your ultrasound tech loves their job and does a fantastic job, but maybe they have a desire to be a little bit more, you know, offering to train them up on CT. So when your CT tech calls in sick that day, you have someone who can just drop right in and do some work. Can you afford to lose your ultrasound business that day or your CT business that day? Well, what's the biggest hit for your facility? Or can you bring in a temp for your ultrasound work and those type of things? So, but with that, knowing your staff's goals, you know, talking to your staff, understanding, you know, everybody in this room is aspired to be somewhere, because there's people in this room who are owners, there's people in this room who are managers, there's people in this room who are true leaders and have moved up the ladder. Well, they're down there still, you know, and you've got those technologists, you've got those staff members who may want to be something else, and they have that desire. You have those employees that are fantastic for showing up 8 to 5 for the next 32 years, and you need them, and we love them. But you also have those employees who want to do more. Well, a huge morale boost for those employees is to bring them alongside and offer up additional trainings in other areas, certifications. I know some of you do that, but just keep that in mind that, there's other ways to eliminate redundancies by having other people within your facility who are trained, who can be jumping any moment, So, and then, with that, it improves your morale. We all have the Debbie Downers who are running around and, and never going to go anywhere in this company and those kind of things. But maybe we can change those, and, as you're working with that staff, they'll help you find your lack of efficiencies. They're the ones who are going to tell you, this is what's happening, yeah, we don't have patience, and so we do this and we do that, and so goes out for 62 smoke breaks a day, or whatever, and those type of things. So, but, tapping into that, the cross training, this is probably just redundant, speaking redundancies, just cross training, getting those people, we do it in the service world, it can be done in the user world. So,
I mean, starting, look at the whole department or clinic, as a whole. How does it operate? From the front desk to your scheduling team, doing an absolute review. Again, looking at where you want to be 3-5 years from now, and what are you doing to go and move in that direction? You may just find the next star sitting there being a receptionist. I know years ago I had a receptionist at a Brentwood, Tennessee, she was just phenomenal at what she did. And she never said anything to anybody that she wanted to move up and do other things until someone, sat down with her and said, what's your goal? She was, well, I don't want to be sitting here. I see what the company does and I want to do all of this other stuff. And all of a sudden she was a sales assistant. Then she was in sales. And 3 years later, she was the #1 salesperson in the whole company. Right? You don't know what you have if you don't know it's just as important to know your team's work and professional goals as it is their personal goals. What is somebody working for? Maybe, somebody wants to work to buy their first house, right? And so how do we help them get there? Then you find out more about their professional needs, and you don't know what you're looking at if you don't take a holistic look at your entire facility, department, clinic, and such.
absolutely. Comments and questions? Okay. Applications. Everybody knows applications is huge. And everybody gets applications when they buy that nice, big, shiny new piece of equipment. So big, shiny piece of equipment shows up, you spend all this money, it's a grand opening, everybody loves it. They put it in 2-3 days of just hands-on dedicated applications, and you're an expert. 3 years down the road, 2 of your techs are gone that were trained. You still have 2 that are working it, but are they using it right? They're using it okay. Are they using functions? I mean, how many people have iPhones or Androids here? You get your pretty phone, you know how to check your voicemail, your email, but does anybody really know all the intricacies of what's deep inside that app? You may get taught in the store real quick, but as you play around with it a year or whatever into it, you can get so much more out of it. Working with a physicist, working with your service company, working with your radiologist, working with your different groups, looking at what studies do we really need anymore? How many images are we really needing on those studies? Looking at all of these things, and can we squeeze more patients through, because we don't need to do, now with the world of multi-slice CT the way they are, we're doing 1,000 images studies when we can crank those down a little bit. The radiologist is reading 100 in the middle and ignoring the rest. What can they do? The technologists are just using the protocol that was set when it was installed. They go, I'm gonna do this, and they run it through and they move them out. Is that the right protocol? Working with your ACR team, your physicist, all those things. Maybe you spend that $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, bring an application specialist back in to not teach your team how to use the machine like they did when they were there from day one, but teach your team how to optimize the way they're doing business. And that's another morale booster for your team, because everybody wants to do better. So if they can use that machine better, they will use that machine better.
if you could shave 3 to 5 minutes off of each scan because you're running sequences that the radiologist just isn't needing. At the end of the day, you'd have an extra 45 minutes. That could be an extra patient, right? It could be 3 brain scans in 15 minutes apiece. It could be a number of different things. So, when these are first set up, they're set up to what we all think is best. Now your radiologists are reading, like Sean said, and they're only using certain images over and over and over again. If you get with your radiologist, you get with your physicist, and you go, I don't need these 3 sequences anymore. That could help you reduce your scan times, more patients, more revenue. And I'll give you an example. A true example happened to me a couple of weeks ago. I've had a Chevy Tahoe for a year and a half now. Just found out that the brights could turn on and off automatically. Didn't know how I did it. It just started when I'm driving, my brights came on. I'm like, what the heck was that? Then they went off, and that scared me even more because I'm not touching anything. Well, I found out if you turn the brights on and off real quick, it sets it into auto mode, that when there's no cars in front of you and it's dark out, the brights automatically come on. If someone's coming at you or you pull up behind somebody, they go off. Had no clue. So how many of those things are happening in your high dollar devices out there that you don't know about? You set up your protocols, and this is how you've been using it, and your techs are just training tech after tech, and you don't know what you don't know again. So drive efficiencies by really looking at your protocols on your equipment and see what you could do. You may be totally optimized, but again, you don't know if you don't look, if you don't take the time to go in and do it, just like optimizing all your service contracts. It may seem daunting, but I guarantee if you sit down with your radiologist, bring your technologist in and maybe your physicist, and you look at the studies, do I really need 1,000 shots for a shoulder, or do I just need these 500? You have to look at it individually and go through them and see what protocols could be adopted.
When I do it, I always do the same thing. They don't want to pay, have happened. And then a lot of times the whole thing, they want to make this scan so 40 minutes, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, and then it's not really what they're doing. Yeah, we literally sacrifice quality where it's just they did, and they will get their money right back one day. Usually it costs a half more.
And then your service company, your service provider gets a phone call, says my image quality is bad. Right, something's wrong. They were great yesterday, they're not good today. So that drives cost up too.
Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that goes back to, again, volume discounts, because you don't just have one device under contract. They're looking at you as a holistic customer, not a customer of this laptop, right? So you get more value with whoever you're working with.
Right, and be aware, I mean, that's a typical OEM relationship because the OEMs have the applications team on board ready to go, but those relationships can be done outside of that. There are applications teams out there around the country that specialize, that can be negotiated into agreements with other vendors also, and it's just, just like anything else, it's you pay for what you need.
Keep forgetting where I put this thing.
All right, and into the last slide that
Neither one of us are experts at.
Yeah, well, neither one of us are experts, and the person that was supposed to be here who's home dealing with COVID, one of the big things is, scheduling. We all know, we want to keep that machine running, and we want to keep those patients going through. So, obviously creating full schedules, looking at how to, use your staff, whether it's cross training, whether it's filling in, do you shut down for lunch, do you have someone else coming in, all of those things. So looking at unique ways to deal with your scheduling, is huge. I can't, like I said, we can't speak dramatically to it, unfortunately, but no-shows are a big piece. I know everybody deals with no-shows, and encouraging your staff to bump patients up, whether if you're a hospital facility, obviously that's when you start reaching out to your inpatient crew and you start bringing them down to fill in some of your no-shows so you can bump some of your times later in the day. But educating your staff that, these no-shows aren't a time to take a break because I've got a half hour now, I don't have to scan because someone didn't show up, and having that desire to fill a spot, is huge. And they have to see it as a value to them, but they also have to see it as a value to your organization. I've got a technologist I've worked with for years. He created, in all reality, a negative reputation for himself within his team, because anytime there was a no-show, first phone call he made was to the floor to find an inpatient. And then that therefore filled that spot where everybody else was like, oh man, I can go take a break, and at the same time, if someone canceled later in the day, he would make phone calls, bump people up, or make phone calls to different people from different days trying to bring people in. Because his mentality was, I'm paid to do a job, I'm paid to crank patients out, let's do it. His other technologists, basically railed against him because they saw it as like, it's a hospital, they're going to make their money and these patients will get done another day. And, so for him doing the right thing, but in all reality, the wrong thing was the other technologist taking a position of, well, they didn't show up, they'll come another day and they'll make their money then. So building morale with your team, showing them where this rewards them and yourselves is huge. So that's my take on that from a prime example. He ended up leaving the facility because the mindset within the facility got to, just get the job done, who cares? So he ended up leaving because he wanted to work somewhere who had the desire to get work done. So you lose a good, what did that facility lose? They lost somebody who was there to be an advocate for that facility because the group had a mentality that was negative, so that's bad. So no shows, I mean, obviously minimizing no shows, nobody can stop them. Hoping that your patients give you the appropriate notice. Speaking of, obviously now everybody's getting the robocalls constantly. Don't forget your appointment tomorrow at 3 p.m. Press 1 to confirm. Staying on top of that is huge. But that's a question for others. Right. Right. Yeah, it's an ongoing challenge that everybody faces, I'm sure. Any way to help. Right. And obviously, you've got your requirements with your insurance companies that you have to get your pre-approvals and all those things, and they're going to do everything they can to make it challenging. And moving those down, then I don't know the ability to move patients up in that set role. Right. Just an ongoing quick call. That makes sense. I would imagine this is a consistent problem throughout the whole medical industry, just for any reason. Mm-hmm. But fortunately for those, a scanner not in operation isn't it's losing money, but it's not losing even more money by losing doses and money that you're outlaying to have that dose that's just going to sit there and go to waste. Right. It's just a flat expense. So, that is a challenge there. And I think it's going to be, everybody wants to run 100% utilization. The positive to that is we're running 100% utilization. The negative to that is you never have room to add anybody either. So it's a consistent ebb and flow of the game, Yeah. Definitely. And it is a challenge across the board, and as with any business, you have your areas of your department that are just going to lose money consistently, and hopefully you make up for it across the board. So any other questions or comments regarding that? I would love to be able to offer more to that. And like I said, Riley Tasker, who is from that world, was supposed to be here, and I got volunteered to take her place due to COVID. So sorry.
So
We're all faced with COVID this year, so we're ready for it all to be over, aren't we?
So none of this is rocket science, like I said in the beginning, right? It's all common sense things, but putting it all together, looking at how your department runs, understanding your service contracts, understanding where your technology lies, and putting it all together and putting a plan together is really the best way to drive it. So just a little humor. We're not recreating the wheel here, but some of us get so busy, we don't take a minute to step back and look, and there's a much better way to get things done. So just figured we'd end with a little humor there. So any questions, any comments?
All right.
There you go.
Thank
We
you.
did it in under an hour and a half.
Thank you. You can have an early lunch, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Oh, go for it.
We could talk offline.
Yeah, we could. Yeah, and
Yeah, we're not here to sell our stuff. We're kind of here to.
that's kind of like saying how much is a CT.
Good answer.
Right. No, definitely talk offline. But I mean, it varies. It's facility size, time size. Everything is just the scope of work, what you're doing, how much information you have up front that we have to dole through to figure out those solutions. Some of it's included in our services, and it's just what we do. And some of it is, you go in to do it to obtain the business. It's the whole package. So, I mean, but I will gladly talk with you offline if you'd like to. So, anyway.
No,
all right.
thank you, everybody.
Thank you for your time, everyone, and enjoy the show.